And welcome everybody to this week's edition of Beyond Belief, the Art of Strange Mentalism. And I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Magic Mike Lanky. And we also have the great
Hi.
Tommy Burnett, Reverend Tommy Burnett
Yeah.
of New York City. And in my opinion, you were probably one of the foremost mentalists, Tommy, of New York City. That's I'm referencing a TV show that probably no one has seen but you and I. And I
Yeah.
want to welcome our very, very special guest, Ian Fenn. And I can go on and on. I won't go on too much, except that you are an AIMC. For those who aren't magicians, you're an associate of the Inner Magic Circle. We'll discuss in a minute how you got to be that. You're a researcher, an author, a magician, and a man about town. So let's please put our hands together for Ian Fenn. And
Thank you.
the reason why I brought this came to me just before the show, Ian. I think it's a good segue to say how you did, in fact, become an AIMC because not everybody gets to do that. Not everybody gets to be a lowly just member, like myself, member of the Magic Circle, let alone an associate of the Inner Magic Circle. So could you share with everyone how you achieved that?
Yeah, it's a funny story to begin with, in that I went to Blackpool Magic Convention and couple of weeks after Blackpool, I got this email that said, Ian, thank you for your interest in joining the Magic Circle. If you would like to join, we're currently running a promotion where we are waiving the application fee. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll do it. And I have no recollection of showing any interest in joining the Magic Circle. Right. But I thought, okay, they sent me an email. They're keen. I'll give it a go. It was something I never dreamed of doing. And I had my interview. It all starts with an interview, and they ask you, what are your feelings on plagiarism and exposure and what's your background, etc., etc. And then if you pass the interview, if you're a performer, you can do a performance exam. If you're a researcher, as I am or claim to be, then you can do a thesis. And let's deal with the performer side of it first. As a performer, you can do a performance on Zoom, or you can in front of examiners, and or you can go to the headquarters in London and do a 10-minute performance in the headquarters, and the examiners will be in the room along with an audience. Um, a lot of people fail that first time. That's the reality. They do it a second time and pass, or they don't. Um, but if you demonstrate considerable skill in that performance in that exam, then you can be given Associate of Inner Magic Circle with Silver Star. So that's the performance side of things. Um, when it comes to the Magic Circle is relatively unusual in the sense that it has always had this alternative route to membership, which is to write a thesis about magic. And I'd previously been a radio producer, and I was aware because I wrote a previous thesis on a different, which had been lost. I don't have a copy of it, which is a tragedy. And Goldsmiths College, University of London threw it away in a purge of essays and whatever, many years ago. And that was about whether magic could be done over the radio. So for the Magic Circle, I proposed to do something that was more about the UK history of radio. And I wrote that, and it took me, you get basically given a year to do it, 9 months really. And yeah, essentially wrote that. And It honestly, it would have been much easier to have paid a professional magician to teach me 10 minutes of really good magic and just to have rehearsed it and rehearsed it and rehearsed it and rehearsed it. That, it would have been a lot easier and cheaper because the research for my thesis, which was this history of radio magic, took me traveling across the UK to various archives, hotel stays, train travel, buying material from libraries in Australia, digitized material, etc. So it was quite an investment. But I was thrilled because the three examiners that were chosen for my thesis were Ian Keeble, Brian Laird, and Marco Pisteria, who are
Wow.
all experts in when it comes to magic history. I couldn't have asked for better examiners,
How
and
exciting.
they they decided that they decided that my thesis was good enough to be AIMC level, but no silver star because I'm not a performer. So that's why I
Right.
explained the performance bit. And
That's
so yeah, I was just thrilled. I would have been happy. I would have been happy with membership, but to get the AIMC is just that really nice thing because particularly when it comes to the thesis route, there's only about 200 people in the world that have it, out of
wow.
2,800 members. So there's not many of us around, but I think it's important that the Magic Circle has an alternative route for people that aren't performers who have an interest, have an interest and express that interest in a different way. So
It is
I was
so
thrilled.
exciting. It's so
And
exciting, Ian.
that thesis later became my book, Magic on the Air. And that's done reasonably well. It's sold 150 copies worldwide,
Wow.
and
Wow.
which is pretty good for a magic history book. So I'm happy with that.
You should be. I want to discuss a little bit at length, radio magic, because the only exposure I had to radio magic was very early in my career. I was asked to guest as a magician on a couple of, two or three actually, radio shows back around the early 80s, mid 80s or so. And quite frankly, it made me anxious because sure, I was used to doing a lot of stage walk around magic and all that sort of thing, but how does one translate a visual? How does one lie? Does one exaggerate and say, okay, let's bring the elephant into the studio and I'm about to make the elephant disappear, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up doing a lot of mentalism, which one can describe more in detail and doesn't require so much a visual. So that worked. And then years later, I was called back to do that elsewhere in Canada. But radio magic apparently has a rich history that you've researched and written about. And I'd like to talk a bit more about that. Who were early pioneers of radio magic?
Well, it's funny you should say that, and I question that because I'm in a hotel at the moment. Tommy's running and
There
got
it
me a copy of my
is.
book.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm quite very proud of that book. Even though I spotted another typo in it today, which I will fix tomorrow. Um, hey, um, I'm in a hotel at the moment, and I'm in a hotel in Birmingham in the UK, not Birmingham in the US, and it's 101 years ago. There was a magician called Albert Daniels and he performed magic on the radio for the very first time 101 years ago. And he it was basically an open air concert and in Cannon Hall Park, which has a bandstand that is still there today. And apparently his act was so successful that they asked him to do it again in this radio studio a month later. So this was for the BBC, and Albert was a bit of a local hero, really, and I think an unsung hero. He spent his lifetime in magic. He was a professional, his entire life until he started working in a magic shop that Birmingham had for many years. And then, of course, that shop went the way that a lot have gone and closed. And but Albert was he was by the time he did his Conjuring performance, he was already an experienced broadcaster because was also a ventriloquist.
Mm.
And so he did his ventriloquism. He used to, I understand, he used to do children impressions of children really well. So he did that on the radio prior to doing this performance at Cannon Hall Park. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's 101. The great thing about researching the radio magic history in the UK is that we didn't have the mess of radio stations and broadcasters that America had. America went commercial straight away, really, and and you had lots of syndicated shows, and that was a good thing in the sense that America got into recording quite quickly. So there's actually quite a lot of old magic recordings available, like Dunninger, for example.
Wow, I love
Um,
those. Yeah, I've listened at
yeah.
length to that. Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, we have less. There's very little recordings out there. I think the earliest recording I did researched was Sadani doing a transatlantic magic trick during the war and the Second World War, and that would have been what 41, 42, all that sort of year without looking it up. And the yeah, so researching radio magic history in the UK was quite easy because it was basically researching magic on the BBC radio.
Very
And
exciting.
but one of the things I've got to tell you, one of the things I love about researching magic and research in general is the serendipity of it. And I know this program is about strange mentalism, or that's at its core, but a lot of mentalism works on the radio. It
Yes.
really does. And we'll hear an example of that coming up, I believe. But there is one effect which, for some reason, has been performed on the radio more times than any other, and that is sawing a woman in half.
Mm, mhm.
But basically, it's many performers have done it, and the first performer to do it was Cecil Lyle,
Oh,
um, and who did it in 1942
mhm,
when he was doing his Cavalcade of Mystery show, and basically, essentially, the BBC visited the theatre. They kept the audience in for an extra half an hour, and then he performed sawing a woman in half with two BBC commentators and
mm,
that it was the serendipity of research is that I could find the Abracadabra magazine, World's Magic Weekly of the time. I
mm,
could find the advert saying he was going to do it. I could find, the Radio Times listing. I could find that was our magazine for radio broadcast and TV now. It's been going years and years and years and years. Um, but I couldn't find an account of the actual broadcast. And the BBC Written Archives had nothing in it, nothing about it. It was too early. And but I realized that Raymond Glendenning, who had been one of the commentators, had written an autobiography. So I thought, oh, I'll give it a shot. So I bought a copy of the second-hand copy of the autobiography for £10, about 15 bucks, and read it. And I got within the last 5 pages of the book, and there was an account from Raymond Glendenning of what it was like to perform this effect on the radio.
mm.
And I just love
Yes,
that thing about, just finding these connections and linking them,
absolutely.
just
I want to
wonderful.
I want to ask you, Ian, because we're all familiar as magicians, mentalists, etc., with Dunninger, who you brought up a little bit earlier, and who was, at least in America, one of the first mentalists on radio. Then he translated it translated well to television. The amazing Kreskin rode those coattails and followed basically a very similar format the amazing Kreskin, an American mentalist. And what makes, I'm not challenging you, but I want us to share with everyone who's not familiar with the Piddingtons, what what makes the Piddingtons or made them at the time so different? Was it the two-person act? Was it the originality of their methods? What made them different or special? And so I believe they were out of Australia. I could be wrong, and then they emigrated to the UK. But what was it about them?
My book, no. It will be answered comprehensively in my book that I will write eventually. I was working out today that I've got my, in terms of my research, I've got 2,359 documents for
Wow.
my Piddingtons research, um, which has involved, visits to the Imperial War Museum. It's involved, as I say, getting material digitized in Australia. The But to answer your question, I think what fundamentally made them so successful, two things actually. One thing is often said about them, which was there was the whole question of whether it was real or not, and that created when the act was developed by Russell Braddon and Sidney Piddington in Changi prisoner of war camp in 1944, they were encouraged to do performances around the camp in order to encourage discussion amongst the men over whether it was real or not. They were basically told, don't share, don't say it's real, don't say it's a trick, leave it open for discussion. So when they did their early shows in Australia and the shows in BBC when they came over in 49, a core part of it, they always used to finish their BBC shows with "You are the judge." So there was this massive discussion in happening nationwide. 20 million listeners by the third episode of the first series.
Wow. Mm.
Um, and yeah, there was just this massive discussion over whether it was real or not. And the interesting thing is that today, it's not as big, but there is a podcast and TV radio series, in effect called Uncanny, and that show, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's open. It can be listened to worldwide, and that show is essentially stories from people who have had strange encounters, met ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, all that kind of thing. And there is Team Skeptic and Team Believer. And it's doing a similar kind of thing, you know. But the Piddingtons did that in 1949, a
Wow.
long time
Huh.
ago, 70, And I think
Yes.
that was one thing, but I think there were other things that the Piddingtons did. They also remember this is the days before Facebook, before Zoom, before any kind of social media, before email, any of that. But Sydney still found time to involve the listening audience in the sense that every program he would read some of the letters that he'd received from people saying, you did it this way. And he would then disprove what these people had said. Now, the Magic Circle was quite worried about that because when Sydney was disproving a suggestion or an explanation, they were concerned that his explanation might reveal a trick, you know. But and but my point really is that he found ways of encouraging discussion with the audience and responding to them, and I think that's one thing that performers could do a lot more today,
Absolutely.
on the radio is to encourage that kind of dialogue in ways that the Piddingtons couldn't. It can be much more
Yeah,
instantaneous today.
Yes.
yeah.
Before we go to a clip, I'm wondering, it's interesting Tommy spoke. Um, I'm wondering if
Yeah.
you have any questions for Ian as well. So I'm going to hand it off to you now. We do this little tag team thing, one, two, three, boom. And what questions, I know you're chomping at the bit, might you have for Ian before we go to that audio clip?
Yeah. So I think we've discussed this in the past, but there are a number of uh, psychic duos nowadays. Um, in your opinion, does anyone compare to the Philippines? And
No.
if not, why?
Um, I remember I said that there were two things about the Piddingtons, and I mentioned one, which was this whole debate of whether it was real or not. I think
Yeah.
the other thing is that they were they were both really good people, it seems, from my research. And
Mm-hmm.
they were really good. Like, I've got a letter from Sydney Piddington to a fan, and you can tell that he really doesn't want to meet the fan because the fan wants to meet him at a really awkward time for them, but he does it anyway. And there's lots of examples in the correspondence that I've seen. So they were really nice people, and everything they did was from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm trying not to lead into the clip too much, but um, the thing is that when I look at two-person telepathy acts today, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, from my perspective, seem to have turned it into a bit of a guessing game in the sense of it's a puzzle for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I saw an illusion being performed by a young performer the other week, and I was like this about the performance because he'd taken this expensive illusion, really good illusion, and it was being presented as a puzzle. I was just like, oh. And it's
Yeah.
that. So I think a lot of two-person telepathy acts are like that. And there are some notable exceptions, and I know we've spoken about them in the past.
Yeah.
Um, but the Piddingtons, and if when we listen to the clip, it sounds like Leslie's plucking things out the air. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it's hard work. I mean, the poor woman, she was a fantastic actress, but she used to throw up before every recording because she was just so nervous that that number of people were listening. And in the second series, she went down in a submarine, a diving bell,
Right.
which was really claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And she did all these things, and she was in the Stratocaster, the airplane. She read his
Mm-hmm.
thoughts from the Stratocaster. That was probably one of the nicer ones because it was a nice BOAC forerunner to British Airways plane. Um, but the Tower of London, I can imagine it was quite foreboding to be in the Tower of London. I've spent the night at the Tower of London looking for ghosts once. That's another story. And the bloody tower at night is really quite something. But I think her performance was just wow. And to me, it would work today because I listen to these broadcasts and I go, I could listen to that if it was fresh tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely.
Well,
Should we go to the clip?
yeah, I was going to say, roll the tape.
Who could resist? Who could resist a cue like that, Tommy?
A lot
Um,
of.
everyone enjoy. It's 10 minutes, so you're going to want to get comfy or run and get a coffee or tea
You
or
want me to set a
something.
little bit of context for it, Dr. Michael?
Sure.
But just quickly to say that this is the first, this is basically the recording or the broadcast because it was live. They insisted on all their programs being live. They were very upset when recordings were used in Australia. Um, So this was from the Tower of London, and it's the conclusion of that episode, and it's the final test. They were always called tests. And Sydney is in the BBC studio with some celebrity guests, or judges as they called them. Leslie is in the Tower of London and has been there the entire evening, with some other judges who were there to see that everything was above board, etc. And I'll lead the commentator. I think if I remember correctly, the commentator is Colin Wills, but I could be wrong with that. I'll check for the afterwards. But the commentator sets it up quite nicely, so I'll let him do the rest.
Wonderful. Thank you for that setup. And everybody enjoy the Piddingtons.
While we wait here in the Piccadilly studio, away across town in the Tower of London, Leslie Pope is at this moment awaiting the most difficult test she's ever attempted. She is in the tower, in the bloody tower, in the Tower of London, and with her are Captain Dorling, Taffrail, and Mr. Hugh Ross Williamson. And we'll hear from them very shortly.
I will attempt to transmit to Leslie a line of print selected from a number of books on the table here in the studio. Half a dozen people will actually take part in the selection of the line. In this way, I'm sure you'll agree that the possibility of a prearranged choice is removed. I will ask several members of the studio audience each to write a figure on a pad. These figures will be added up. The total will indicate the page of a book. To leave you without doubt, each figure will be initialed by the person supplying it.
Well, now, Piddington is going down into the audience with his pad, and he's stopped at a gentleman in the second row who's writing down a number, and who will be asked to initial it. That is done.
Just about that size, so it can be added up afterwards.
How many fingers?
Just one, yes, and then sign your name to it. Just out here at the side, that's right. Thank you. We haven't got much time, I'm awfully sorry.
He's hurrying on. The lady now in the fourth row.
A single
Writing
figure,
down a number.
sign your name to it. And would you do that, please? Just a single figure under there and sign your name to it. Would you mind doing that, please? Just a single figure under there. Would you mind doing that, please? And another single figure under there and sign your name to it. Now, would you add up those figures? And then just sign your name to that. And now, that hasn't given us a very large total. Would you like to put that in the hundreds by adding either 1, 2, 3, or 4 in front of that? And then just sign your name to that, just as quickly as you can, because I'm awfully sorry, time is really running short. Thank you very much.
Collected his numbers. He's coming quickly back to the platform.
Dennis Price, would you take the pad and come onto the platform with me? And would you, judge number 3, Sir Herbert, come to the platform and from the books on the table, pick up 1. Just whichever book you like from the table. Now, would you like to change your mind? Would you like to put that book back and take another one? You've changed your mind.
Yes, I will.
He has changed his mind.
Now, the total of the sum will indicate the page in the book. Dennis Price, would you turn up the page in the book with the help of Sir Herbert? Now, to find a line down, I want you to add the figures in the total together and write that down at the side.
This is done.
Just add those 3 together.
Yes.
And write that down. Now, would you count down that number of lines in the page? Just come round and check that. On the top, I think. Just mark that at each end with the pencil, and then would you read out the line to the listening audience? Just a line that you have marked there.
The line selected is "be abandoned," as the electrician said that they would have no current.
Now, would you just repeat that again in case they are writing it down at home?
Be
Right,
abandoned,
please.
as the electrician said, that they would have no current.
Now, would you tell the listeners the name of the book?
The name of the book is George Miller.
And while Colin Wills calls in the Tower of London, would you, Dennis Price, take the book and print up the line on the blackboard for the studio audience to see it?
Yes, pleasure. I shall now call in the Tower of London. Are you there, Captain Dorling and Mr. Hugh Ross Williamson?
Yes, we're in the Bloody Tower, where the little princes were supposed to have been smothered in 1483.
That's the room that most of you probably know, if you visited. The 4-foot walls, Leslie's standing in an embrasure of the window, quite near the picture of Sir Walter Raleigh, and we are standing by the copy of Sir Walter Raleigh's book, The History of the World, that he wrote in this room.
Thank you very much. Are you there, Leslie Pope?
Yes, I'm here, very closely guarded by Captain Dorling and Mr. Ross Williamson. I must say I'm very glad I've got them here with me.
Now, to put you all in the picture, so far a book has been selected and a page and a line in it indicated by figures supplied by the studio audience. Sir Herbert Dunico has read the line to the listening audience, and at this moment Dennis Price has just completed writing it on the blackboard in the studio. And here is Piddington speaking in the Piccadilly studio to ask a question of the judges who are with Leslie in the tower.
Judge number 1, Captain Dorling. Has Leslie been with you since she left this studio before the broadcast began?
Yes, every second.
And Mr. Ross Williamson, have you any idea of the book selected, the page number, or what the line is?
No idea at all.
Now, Dennis Price, as I say, has finished writing the line on the blackboard, and remember, Piddington is here in the Piccadilly studio, and Leslie is in the Tower of London. Are you ready to go ahead with the test, Piddington?
Yes, I am. In just a moment, at the sound of the gong, I want your complete silence, your sympathy, and your cooperation. Now concentrate on the line while I attempt to transmit it to Leslie.
Men? Men? Light? Something to do... An electrician. Something about light and electricians. People being left. Will you concentrate on the word that's like being left, people being left, abandoned. Abandoned. The electricians talking. Said that not light. Concentrate on the word like light. Current. No current. Electricians said they would not have current. I think the whole line is abandoned, as the electricians said there would not be current.
I ask you, Sir Herbert, as judge number 3, would you say that that was substantially correct?
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And there we go. That was incredible. And it's hard to believe that that was broadcast in the 40s, 50s, something like that. It does stand up to any mentalist, to any mentalist teams, two-person mentalist teams. And I think it's because it really appears that she's trying, she's struggling with it. And that's part of the whole thing, isn't it? It's like a regular person couldn't just pick up anything, mental or visual or whatever, without a great struggle, let alone someone who's adept at doing mentalism. It's still a struggle. It's still believable, if you will. And I'd like to discuss, if I may, with you, Ian. And we touched on this before we went to the clip, how the Piddingtons differ from many two-person telepathy acts today. We've seen, I think, a lot of us who are either professional magicians, amateur magicians, or mentalists, if you will. We've seen on those Penn and Teller type of shows, or those competitive shows. The names escape me right now. They're all over the world on the telly. We've seen usually a man and a woman. We haven't seen woman and woman or man and man doing mentalism yet, but there's something lacking. And I'm not putting them down because they spend a fortune on a lot of electronic equipment. For sure. And there's still some remnants of older techniques that some of them are using. But acting is so crucial, is it not, Ian?
I think it is. Interestingly, you asked me about the history of radio magic in the UK. And I mentioned that Albert Daniels and then talked myself into a cul-de-sac. But just to say that the Piddingtons were followed on air, not with a program, but there was a two-person telepathy act called Pharos and Marina. And they followed the Piddingtons and they did a 10-minute segment on a variety show. Um, and they were much more like many of today's acts in the sense that they asked for items from the audience, and then the medium, Marina, then revealed what the items were. She was blindfolded, and their angle, if you like, was the number of articles that they would do in the time that they had. And they were really quite impressive at that. But it wasn't an act that worked particularly well for radio because it was the same thing every week. It didn't change. And I think that was one of the things about the Piddingtons as well. If you're a magician, you can kind of see that they've done similar routines. But one of the things Sydney was good at as well was that he was good at, and again, magicians should do this today. He was very good at making the performances topical and relevant to the day. So in Australia, he did a routine that was based around horse racing and the Melbourne Cup. When he came to London, he did effectively the same effect, but he did it around football because it was the FA Cup. He tried to make things relevant if he could. Feros and Marina, they were replaced in this program by a gentleman I'm sure you've heard of called David Burglass. And David was a master at radio. I had lengthy chats with him about it before he passed, and he used to. At its core, but good radio magic is about creating pictures. And I say that magicians should, hone their script and get rid of all the boring bits. And these are things that David did, in the 50s. He would do a lot of pre-show, but it was pre-show in the sense of doing boring things that wouldn't have been that good on air. So he would get the audience members ready, he would get them to do the boring things. then on air he would present it. He also understood that radio was about making pictures, and he would develop routines that included sound. One of his more interesting routines was where he had gentlemen from the audience. Um, he had one man hammering and another man drilling and another man sawing. So he had all these noises going off. When he did believe it or not, and I couldn't get him to explain it because, he wanted to keep some secrets.
Or
He moved a 1950s heartthrob. I forget who it was now, but it's written down somewhere in my notes. But he moved this heartthrob, this physical person, from one BBC studio to another. And what the listener heard on air was a change in the acoustics as the person moved. So you could hear that there was a difference from the first place to the second place. He was doing this in the 50s.
wow,
The 50s. Amazing.
wow,
So it's kind of and we also had Fogel. Fogel was one of the Morris Fogel, the amazing
Maurice Morris, yeah. Hmm.
yeah, he did a one-off radio show that was 15 minutes, and he only with only having 15 minutes, he did do pre-show in that as well, and eliminated the boring, which is what I gave it as one of my principles of radio magic was create pictures, eliminate the boring, be topical, be responsive. And so Fogel, unfortunately, it didn't work out for Fogel because of he was attacked by newspapers afterwards because his BBC producer had, claimed that he was for real and all this. So of course, the newspapers then set out to prove that he wasn't. And he never really recovered from that, unfortunately. And John Fisher, I think, the TV, who produced Paul Daniels for many years, he wrote at one point that Fogel it had been intended to put Fogel on a series, and but it didn't happen because of all that uproar. And when the Piddingtons actually, this was pre-Piddingtons, and when the Piddingtons wrote to the BBC for to try and get on the BBC, their letter to the BBC tries to put some distance between Fogel and what happened with that show and them. And they were obviously successful. They did a trial recording and that went well. And then they got the first series. They were then invited back to do 3 shows. The BBC couldn't get them to do more because they were being really successful in the variety circuit. And they had a tour of South Africa and Australia lined up. And then after that, they did one more show where Sydney was in the Blackpool Tower. So when I went to Blackpool last year for the Magicians convention, I booked some time at Blackpool Archive, sat down and went through all the newspapers, local newspapers, and sure enough, there was a photo of the guys that appeared in the Blackpool program. And I didn't know who they were. I had names, but I didn't know what roles they had or anything. But after finding that newspaper, I got the information. So that's what I mean. Research is lovely. One of the things. So just finally on that, the Piddingtons had a little bit of a rough ride. They had a rough ride from the Magic Circle, as I mentioned. Your Magic Circle was worried about potential exposure. Other magicians were some magicians were jealous of their success. Um, there was one in particular, the Great Marlowe, and I own his copy of Animan's Practical Mental Effects, bizarrely. But the Great Marlowe, tried to, he explained to a columnist, a newspaper columnist, the one that gave Fogel a hard time actually, about how things could be coded and that
Oh
kind of thing.
no,
It was
brother.
quite, there was a bit of jealousy there. And
Yeah.
there was this rumor that the Piddingtons were kind of, run out of tone by magicians because they were given quite a hard time. But that's actually not true. The Piddingtons plan all the way along was to do 4 years, for about 4 years in London and the UK, do what they can in that time, and then stop. And that's what they did. They started in the UK in 49, they finished in 52, 3 years. They'd had enough, and they had a family. And a few years later, they then went back to Australia. And oddly enough, they went back to Australia, I think, right about the month that David Berglas started broadcasting.
Right.
So that's how everything connects. But yeah, it was interesting that Feros and Marina, who are more like today's acts, just didn't work on the radio because it didn't have enough variation week to week. So I think, yeah, the Piddingtons are, reflecting even more on them. They were just a perfect radio act. And I think they would be today with, a few more cuts and edits and what have you. That 10-minute routine would probably become, 6 minutes.
Absolutely.
But
Hmm.
and we could still debate how it was done. In those days, you heard the tug go. That caused a lot of letters. People were convinced that the tug was coding to her, but it was coincidence. It was just, something, it just happened. There was a tug going under Tower Bridge at the time. And the other thing that was often claimed was that because Sydney had a stammer, and his stammer would appear when he was nervous, and people
Ah,
were convinced that the stammer was coding to her. But
interesting.
honestly, I can tell you that um, Leslie was so nervous about broadcasting to such a huge number of people that coding from stammers is just not something she would have been able to do, I'm
I
sorry.
bet not. I bet not. As we begin to wrap up, Tommy, do you have anything to add? Any questions? Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of dual acts. Many of them are friends of mine. Um, I've never been lucky enough to find a partner willing to do that with. I've always wanted to try it. Um, and I must correct Dr. Michael. There is a two-man dual act, Morgan and West. Do a very good two-man mentalism act. But you're right, there are no two women acts that I'm aware of. I would pay good money for that. So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
but Ian, I've read your book, Masters on the Air. I just want to give a little plug to anyone who hasn't read this book. I highly recommend it. Um, Even if you don't perform on the radio, there's a lot of good stuff in here that you can use, um, on stage or parlors setting, and it's very interesting. I've read it from cover to cover twice and have used yes, and I don't say that about every book, um, including my own, including my own. Um, but it's very well written and has a lot of very interesting things that I didn't know, which is in itself a miracle. So, but yeah,
Thank you, Tommy.
and, yeah, I gotta put in a plug for my favorite duo, the Eversons will always be my favorite because they, in my opinion, they are today, by today's standards, even though they do a lot of the same type of things, I believe they are the most natural
Mm.
sounding, and I'm not saying they use a code um, because because I'm not saying it, um, but I've seen them multiple times, and they are as real as you're gonna see, um, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that they have, like as you know, I know you've got your backdrop, Tommy, but I know your home is full of, posters of
yeah,
magicians and
yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
thing, and I know a lot of magicians like doing that, and the I've got Tintin and Hergé's The Blue Lotus, but so forgive me, but a lot of magicians have that, and they have a playbill for the Piddingtons on their wall.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I think I
and
remember seeing that. I think I remember seeing that because they were on my podcast, my first podcast about 5 years ago. Um, and I think they might have shown me around after the show. They took me on a little tour, and
mm.
I think I saw that. But yeah, um, and anyway, you I'm getting out of focus. I don't know why, but there we go. Um, you are one of my favorite historians as far as magic and mechanism
Oh no,
goes.
I've got to make the Piddingtons book good now, haven't I?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna tell you what to do, but I've never had a book dedicated to me before, so I'm gonna tell you what to do, but no.
I love it. We've learned so much today, many of us on so many different levels. We learned a lot from you, Ian, that people will acknowledge, I'm sure, in our post chat. Once we finish, I want our in-studio audience to stick around and maybe chat with you briefly and share some experiences. But for now, I want to thank you so much, Ian, for making the time to come on our show, to come to Beyond Belief, the Art of Strange Mentalism, and I'm hoping that we'll do this again down the road as well. You've inspired me. I'm not just saying that to be nice, but regardless, you are an inspiration as well on so many levels. You're appreciated, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Ian. And there we go. And we have a wee bit to boom. We have a wee bit to cover. Oh, where's my cheat notes? We're on the air every Saturday at the same time, 1 p.m. LA time, 4 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. UK time. It live streams to Facebook. Obviously, if you're watching it on Facebook, you know that. Always DM us, instant message us if you want the Zoom link so that you can be in studio and chat with whichever guests are on. Sundays, I do my Sunday message, same time again, same deal. It live streams to Facebook, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. UK time. And we mustn't forget our friends, some of whom are here today on Open Mic Magic Theater. If you want to catch that every Wednesday, same deal, 1 p.m. LA time, 4 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. UK time. Look for it on Facebook, Open Mic Magic. I'm a regular, you're a regular, Tommy, and whoever else is in the audience. I believe we have the great Micah Covers in the audience as well, the man who is responsible for this incarnation of Open Mic Magic Theater. I believe is in our audience as well, Kevin Peel. And I'm not sure if his lovely co-host is here or not, Rabina. But you've got to catch this. It's free. It's some of the greatest magicians in the world every Wednesday, and certainly
Who
entertaining.
knew?
Friday, March 6th, Kevin and I will explain more about what's coming up on Wednesday on Open Mic Magic, the Midnight Wizards Collective. It's a gala hosted by myself and the great Kevin Peel as well. We'll tease you a little bit because you'll have to watch Open Mic Magic Theater. And there's a show from Australia, seen every Monday, but we'll let Kevin tackle that on Wednesday as well. It's another great show that you don't want to miss. I'm not just saying that to be nice. So I guess that's it, Tommy. We've got our first official show down and
Yeah.
done. How do you feel?
Well, great, obviously. It was a great show, but I have a few announcements of my own.
Oh, right
Um,
on. Yes.
yeah, I have a couple of things on sale at my website. Um, let's see now. We have uh, three close-up effects. One is called Spot On, uh, which is mini skulls, and one of them has a spot on it, and your participant will always end up with the one that has a spot. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you perform it. And there's sounds of candle cloth, which is a matching effect, and spell of choice, again, a matching effect, but with an Egyptian motif. Then we have my famous Mark Twain book cast. You get 4 books with normally the set is $250. And I know this says you save 50, but I did the math, and you actually save $100 if you buy it now using the bundle. You get 4 books with the PDF explaining how each book works, and then finally, every book I've ever written, which is only 3, but not only 3, it's 3. My most recent book, Beneath the Surface, which many people have called a resource that you really want to have. And there's Cyclops and Advancing Mother, which is my take on Mother of all bookcasts. And yeah, and you've actually saved a little bit more than $40 on that. Or you can just buy my book, Beneath the Surface, which again probably has sold not quite as many as Ian's, but I'm catching up. I think we're at like 115, so we're catching up. And I'd like to get it up to 150. So anyone who hasn't bought the book, buy it now. And the website is right over here. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. MasterTaboo.com. Let's get this out of the way now. There we go. And now we can say goodnight.
I love it. I love that name, magictaboo.com. It's super. Go to his site. There's very few high quality stuff because I know you care about your work, Tommy. Tommy's a graphic designer and does some of the most beautiful tarot cards and illustrations ever. And you can catch some of these effects that he does for Magic Taboo on Open Mic Magic Theater Wednesdays. So keep a lookout for that. I want to thank you so much, Tommy, for being my co-host, for honoring me this day. And I want to thank all of you out there for honoring us by watching this show. We'll see you all really soon. Thank you.